YouTube, "Is he a hero or is he a traitor?" seems to be the headline of the week. Of course, distracting people somewhat from the dozens of other scandals is this Edward Snowden, who of course broke the leaks about the NSA to the Guardian over in Britain. And depending on who you ask, he's either a befuddled kid, essentially, who doesn't know what he's doing and is shortly going to be killed by the CIA, or he's the next Paul Revere, or he's the next Benedict Arnold, and it depends on how people look at it. The consensus is, in the online community anyway, and this is what I've seen from even the left-leaning people over at CNN, the consensus seems to be that what he did, even if it wasn't heroic, was good. Essentially, that even if what he did was illegal, which is kind of a gray area actually, because some of this information wasn't technically secret and had already been broken years ago, so it's not exactly clear if he could even have conceivably committed treason, that even if he did, essentially the public has a right to know what's going on in the government. All of these secrets were negative in nature. They didn't need to be secret in the first place. If the government has nothing to hide, why are they keeping it secret? And it's interesting. A lot of people on the comments areas who, and I suspect that the larger share of them, are people that belong to what's called the Rapid Response Squad. Now, this is a group of volunteers that were basically associated with Obama's re-election campaign, but are still presumably very much active, who organized together and aggregated news sources that may be detrimental to Obama's standing in the world, and they would go out and attack them. Or they would go out and prop up positive stories about Obama, which was a little bit dystopian at the time, but everyone sort of just assumed it was just another level of his extensive organization online. But anyway, there are a lot of people saying, well, I don't have anything to hide. Why would I care if the government looks through my phone records? Well, if the government doesn't have anything to hide, logically then, by extension, they don't need to keep these things secret. And these are the same people calling Snowden a traitor. I look at him not necessarily as a hero, but he did what was right. He saw that there was abuse going on. This is no different than if you were in a business and you saw animals being mistreated, or you saw workers being beaten, or unsafe conditions, whatever it happens to be. He came forward, he blew the whistle, and blew the top right off the story. And now the entire world watches transfixed, and even this is the most weird part about it of all. Michael Moore has attacked Obama over this. Jon Stewart has made fun of it. The New York Times has come out against it. The Amazing Atheist, a host of people who definitely are leftists have come out and attacked Obama on this. It's not just a bunch of Tea Partiers, although there are also paid shills on comments areas saying, well, the only people that are worrying either have something to hide or they're members of the Tea Party. I'm not a Tea Partier, so I always found that funny. But Snowden is certainly not a traitor. He did what was right. The public has a right to know what their government is doing. All of this secrecy in the government sort of dates back to the Cold War, which is sort of when we started losing freedom to begin with. The idea that we needed more espionage, more spying, less clarity, less transparency, that everyone needs to live in fear all the time. Rights were taken away during the Cold War under the guise of fighting communism. They're being taken away today under the guise of fighting terrorism. And in both cases, we sort of screwed it up ourselves. Because we kept doing things deliberately to antagonize the Russians, although they did the same to us, and we're doing the same thing to Middle Easterners to this very day. Now, I'm not a pacifist towards the Middle East. I think that we should pit bomb individuals who are attacking our country. That does not mean that I need to walk around in constant fear of terrorism and give up my rights. It doesn't mean that I have to be afraid that some crazed jihadist, some bearded illiterate camel piss drinker from over in the middle of the desert is going to come slit my throat in my sleep. And that as an extension of that, I have to give up all my privacy. I've pointed this out to people. If we lose our privacy and we lose our freedom, we're essentially letting them win. And it was George W. himself who came out and said, "Terrorists hate our freedom." Well, if they hate our freedom, they're kind of winning right now. They haven't done anything lately domestically to the United States, and we're giving up all of our freedom. Privacy is part of that freedom. The right to keep and bear arms, the right to organize, to speak, to have a transparent government. These are all things that we should hold dear. And I've seen polls from the Washington Post saying, well, something like 50% of Americans don't care, and some even think the government should go further. I highly doubt that. Judging from what I'm seeing online, talking to other people, I strongly doubt that. They must have polled 1,000 self-proclaimed liberal Obama supporters in order to get that number. They would have had to. There's no possible way. When you've got people like Michael Moore coming out against this program, you know that Obama's got problems. You know that there are problems. It makes absolutely no sense that more than 50% of Americans would support this surveillance program. Either that or they truly are as dumb as some of the more tinfoil hat-wearing people have said, and they honestly have no clue what's going on. And they're getting their talking points from MSNBC or something. You would have to be fairly in the dark about the issue to not understand that these were unconstitutional things that were going on. You would have to be in the dark, and it's been steadily creeping up. Of course, the TSA groping people, the IRS going after political groups. It's just one thing after another, and Snowden exposed all of this. Snowden is now fearing for his life, but the measure of a true patriot, and this is something that a lot of Americans post 9/11 don't seem to understand, and post Soviet era didn't seem to understand either. Patriotism has nothing to do with supporting your government. Patriotism has nothing to do with not breaking the law. Patriotism has nothing to do with work ethic. Patriotism has nothing to do with religion. Patriotism is the willingness to stand up and say something or do something when you see something going on that is wrong in regards to your country. Snowden did that. Snowden is a patriot. Whether you agree with him or not, he saw something that he felt was going on that was unethical, that was immoral and corrupt. He stood up about it. He gathered that info and leaked it to the public. And he's now in fear of his life 24/7. And he could already be dead by now, and nobody would ever find out. He could have already been dissolved in a bathtub full of acid, and trust me, that's entirely possible. With the CIA going after him, you never know. Or he could be being interrogated right now and get shot in the back of the head and left in an alley. Oh, by the way, some Chinese thug just happened to shoot him in the head with this pistol. He is a patriot. You can bicker all day whether he's a hero or a traitor, but he's still a patriot because he did what he thought was right, even though he knew he would suffer for it. The founders of this country, and people also seem to forget this, were not fighting some foreign source. They weren't fighting a foreign government, they were fighting their own government. They were still British at the time. They rose up in arms and started killing people, and we remember them as patriots, and say, well, we should compare ourselves to them. They were honest, upstanding men. They killed people. Snowden hasn't killed anybody or fired a shot. He's fighting his own government too, on behalf of his country, just as the founders did. They saw there was abuse happening. They saw that things were going on that were immoral and wrong. They stood up to them. And at first, they didn't fight physically. They tried to use diplomacy. They said, we're being taxed unfairly. The soldiers are quartering in our homes. You're abusing us. Please stop here. We'll figure something out. Come talk to us. And they said no. Then they started fighting. Well, Snowden hasn't done any fighting. All he did was expose to the public what they should have known already, was that their government was watching everything that they did, like they were a bunch of little children, like they weren't trustworthy, like they were all terrorist suspects, like they were all suspected of being a bunch of bearded, illiterate jihadists. But at the same time, we're supposed to be afraid of people on the other side of the ocean and rat out our neighbors and not read certain books. And by the way, Obama and his staff have told the military not to let any of the soldiers read anything about these leaks. And that's something that got hushed up fairly early. There's another story online about how the court that authorizes these things has actually expressed an opinion, too, that in some cases this could be unconstitutional. And the Justice Department is fighting to keep that from going public as well. Although it technically already is, because there's a story about it, so it's kind of pointless to bother doing that. There's abuse going on right now. A severe abuse of people's constitutional rights. They're not privileges, they are rights. They are things that we are entitled to whether or not the government thinks we are, whether or not the government wants them to be. Those are rights that we have. You can't change that fact. If the government came in and suddenly said, we're banning all weapons, we're banning all protests, we're banning everything, you're all going to go to the gulag, everyone would rise up. But we're essentially going more slowly towards that, and some people seem not to notice. And people who say, well, you're just exaggerating, the sky's not falling, things aren't that bad. Look at North Korea, look at how bad they are. We're so much better off than the North Koreans. You can't compare yourself to another country that is despotic and say how much better off we are. You should instead compare yourself to the more free countries of the world and say, are we any better off than them? The United States was founded on an exceptionalistic notion that we should be better. That we should be better off. We should be wealthy. We deserve to be wealthy. We also deserve to be free. We deserve to be trusted with guns. We deserve to be trusted to protest, to organize on the streets, to speak our mind, to have a free, open media that's not beholden to the government. We're losing these freedoms. That's the concern. It has nothing to do with we're better off than the fucking North Koreans, or better off than the Iranians, or better off than any of these other people. We need to look internally. Do you want to live your life in constant fear? Most people will say no. Okay, you're afraid of the terrorists. Why? Name more than 3 attacks that they've successfully carried out on our soil in the last 30 years. Most people can't do it. They remember 9/11. They remember the Boston Marathon bombings. They can't remember anything else. They can't even point out 3 instances to me in which the terrorists have steamrolled some building or killed somebody. They can't point them out. They don't have a long enough memory span to point it out to me. So I say, well, that's 2 things. Why are you so worried? Why are you so afraid of these people? Terrorists aren't going to suddenly crash a plane into your home just because you go online and say, Allahu snack bar, haha, Muhammad was gay. They're not going to do that. They're on the other side of the world. Our government is right here oppressing us as we speak. And we let the terrorists essentially win, at least according to Bush's logic about what terrorists want, every time we give up freedom. Every time that you are afraid of speaking your mind online, and this has had a chilling effect. I've already seen people who are usually quite vocal kind of shut up and not say anything online. No, you should be filling the airwaves right now. You should call into your local political radio station. You should go online. You should sign all the petitions to impeach Obama, to impeach your local congressman or whatever that happened to vote for this law, to impeach Feinstein, to get rid of Clapper, to pardon Snowden. You should be going online and on the radio and to the media, right into the editor. You need to spread it around. The idea is you can't let them frighten you into shutting up. You have to be more vocal than ever when these things happen, because mass public outcry is your only savior in such a situation. And when I see that anyone supports more surveillance, I say, my God, 1776 is more important than 9/11. Things did not magically change on 9/11. The terrorists were already there plotting against the United States, and by and large they fail miserably. We already had the CIA watching every move they made. We already had the military beating up on them. These are impoverished, half-illiterate individuals on the other side of the world. They're not going to get a hold of a nuclear warhead and set it off in D.C. It's not going to happen. We've got too much intelligence already, too many boots on the ground, and they don't have enough money to pull it off. They can't do it. The government is the one oppressing you and making you afraid right now, not the jihadists. I've never been afraid of a bunch of goofy terrorists over there. I don't care what they do. Let them blow each other up over in the desert. We should leave them alone and let them depopulate themselves. That's how ignorant they are. They can't even run a country. You think they can honestly bring a nuke over here? You think Iran is ever going to fire a nuke at New York City? It's not going to happen. I'm more afraid of the government trampling on my rights and thus removing the very reason I exist. What do I have to live for if I don't have freedom? Why would I care if a terrorist killed me if I didn't have freedom? I'm already not free. They supposedly want to destroy freedom. Well, it's already been destroyed. What's the point of living? I might as well sign up for the military and go over there, walk into a firefight, and get my head blown off. It makes no difference. That's the point. And Snowden exposed all this. No, he's not a hero, but he's certainly not a traitor. He's a patriot. He did what he thought was right. And shame on us as a society when we think that legalism is more important than what is truly morally right. We're saying that the government is more important than right and wrong? That's crazy talk. You're completely berserk and insane if you honestly believe that. Did surveillance help 6 million Jews during the Holocaust? Did it help tens of millions of Russians under Stalin? Did it help tens of millions of Chinese people under Mao? Did it help people under Pol Pot's regime? Did these people get help by domestic surveillance and by increased security at the cost of freedom? No, it killed these people. Let's ask Anne Frank what she thinks about domestic surveillance and how it worked for her. It's pointless to do these things. It's completely and utterly lunacy. It's lunacy to give up your freedom and privacy for security. It does not work. It hasn't worked.